Listen, the fact that Deontay Wilder was heavyweight champion of the world for 5 years, doesn't matter who you're beating, he beat his mandatories. I've never in my life seen anybody who's the heavyweight champion of the world more disrespected than what I've seen Deontay Wilder disrespected over the past 8 months. Like, they're making it seem like Deontay Wilder is a nobody. The guy had such a high knockout percentage, 10 successful title defenses. He beat the people who the sanctioning body put in front of him. What did you want him to do? But so many people have lost the first time in boxing. You can go back to Joe Louis in 1936 when he lost to Max Schmeling, comes back and defeats Max Schmeling and rectifies the loss. There have been cases. Tommy Morrison got blown out by Ray Mercer. 20 months later, comes back, beats George Foreman to become the heavyweight champion of the world. But I'm pissed off that people have disrespected Deontay Wilder. The people in the UK support UK fighters. Why is it that here in the United States, American fight fans would rather support a fighter from overseas instead of one of your own homegrown champions? This is crazy to me. Like, how do we not support our own fighters? It is ludicrous.
All right, good evening, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Final Bell, hosted by Danger Zone Boxing Talk. We got an interesting night of topics for you guys. Also, we're joined by a very special guest. As usual, we're glad to have him on. PBC commentator Ray Flores. How you doing this evening?
What's up, Twine? How are you, my man? Great to be with you guys here on The Final Bell.
Thanks for joining. And as usual, we're joined by co-host BC Left Hook, Malachi. How you doing this evening, bro?
I'm doing good, man. I'm looking forward to doing this interview with Ray, finding out a little bit about what got him into the business and everything. So,
okay, so we'll go ahead and before we start with topics, we'll kick it off with a little background on Ray. Go ahead and kick it off, Malachi.
So Ray, I was always wondering, when I hear you guys announcing and the guys who get us ready for the fight. What got you into the business? Was it a passion for boxing, or was this something you walked into?
No, Malachi, I've always been a fight fan since, I'm 34 now, but I remember my first fights being probably 1989, 1990 is probably 3-4 years old, watching Chavez against Meldrick Taylor and, that stoppage by Richard Steele, and then watching Mike Tyson get knocked out by Buster Douglas, and watching the SET pay-per-views with Steve Albert and Ferdy Pacheco and Bobby Chaz when they do Chavez fights. And, I gravitated towards the fight game. The first fight that I remember watching when it comes to promotional-wise from start to finish was when Chavez fought Macho Camacho back in 1991 in September, which incidentally set forth the attendance record at the Thomas and Mack Center. So that was Mexico against Puerto Rico. There was that rivalry. And, to be able to go ahead and remember that and down the line, when I was 17, 18, I was doing public access TV where I grew up in East Chicago, Indiana, which happens to be the home of former fighter Angel Manfredi, who defeated Arturo Gatti in a non-title fight a long time ago, the late great Arturo Gatti. But I grew up following around a local MMA fighter named Miguel Torres, who was a champion within the WEC ranks at 135. But before Miguel got into the WEC, he was fighting locally. So we would do a local story on him. And then he was like, hey, you guys want to come out to the fights? And I'm like, you know what? Can we broadcast your fights and show it a week later on public access TV? So that's what I started doing when I was 17 years old. I'd sit up in the balcony because we only had one camera, and I would sit next to the camera, plug my mic, next to it. And then I'd call the fight from the balcony. And then after that, we started building on that and went to Columbia College, did an MMA and a boxing radio show thanks to one of my mentors. And then it just kind of subsequently built from there. An MMA promoter, Joe Goitia, who I owe a lot to, was like, hey, I know you're doing radio. You want to come out and ring announce, it'll pay you $200. And I was a sophomore in college. I'm like, $200 is sophomore in college, that's big money. I was like, yo, I'll do it, and then another promoter asked me if I could do it. And then connected with Bobby Hitz with Hitz Boxing, and he's a boxing promoter in Chicago. And, then I started working. I met Joe Martinez, who is, ring announcer for GoldenBoy, UFC. and he liked my work. We worked together on a local MMA show, and he goes, hey, if I'm not available, can I throw your name in with GoldenBoy? And this is back in like the summer of 2011. And then I did my first show for GoldenBoy in December of 2011, filling in for him on solo book sales. So I did that 2011, 2012. Then in 2013, I hooked up with Artie Palullo of Band Promotions, who used to promote Ruslan Provodnikov, promoted Acelino Freitas, the greatest boxer in Brazilian history. And I started doing Friday night fights for him in 2013, 2014. And then half of 2015, made my HBO debut with Provodnikov and Lucas Matisse back in April of 2015. And then in December of 2014, during all that, because of my whole relationship with GoldenBoy and filling in for Joe, I would do Mayweather undercards. So I would go in to Vegas on like a Wednesday, do their Thursday night fights, which the Charlo brothers fought. Jamal Charlo fought on. Luis Ortiz fought Latif Coyote. So it's funny that he's fighting tomorrow night. I remember announcing his fight like 6 years ago. So I would do that, and then I would stay to do the Mayweather undercards. My first Mayweather undercard was Mayweather Canelo in September of 2013. Ooh. So, in that I met Tom Brown because Tom was involved. TGB Promotions was involved in helping Floyd promote those fights, and his wife, who I owe a lot to, Sandy Goosen-Brown, heard my voice just walking into the building and was like, "Who's that announcer? Like, you need to find out who that is," and told Tom. So then Tom called one of his staff members to get my information. My first show for Tom Brown was in December of 2014. It was the Night of Champions on ESPN with Austin Trout. It was like 5 or 6 world champions that fought on that card. The next week, I did the weigh-in, I did the fight. He goes, I was in the lobby at the Pachanga after the show. He goes, "What are you doing next week?" I'm like, nothing. What's up? He goes, "You're coming to Seattle with us. You're doing Showbox next week." So I did Showbox the next week. And then PBC started in March of 2015, and they were starting to promote PBC events. He called me in June of that year, asking me to come and do the press conference for Robert Guerrero and Aaron Martinez on NBC. So I flew in, did the press conference, flew back. Because of that, then I got the ring announcing job for PBC on ESPN, and I've been with PBC ever since June of 2015. So that's my story in a nutshell.
That's an interesting background, Ray. I have a question for you because, like, you've been able to see multiple sides of the game. From being a ring announcer to doing like color commentary, what you do now. Yeah. How's your preparation? Like, how does it differ for both roles? And do you still do a ring announcing as well, or are you strictly on commentary?
I do ring announcing whenever I'm asked. So it's like being a 5-tool player. So. If they need me right now, my job has been primarily focused on play-by-play, which that is my ultimate passion. That's my ultimate love. It is the thing that drives me the most in this business, because if there's anybody I'm going to look up to, or I have looked up to, who I admire, who I believe is just the all-time greatest, and I think I've told you guys, is Jim Lampley. To me, Jim Lampley is the greatest play-by-play man in boxing history, and nobody comes close, and that's a fact. So being able to try to further what he set forth is my mission, because he came forth with passion, with energy, with information, and he literally was a hardcore fight fan, but he made you feel that much more special. When Lampley came on, you knew that you were in for something special. But, I still do ring announcing. I mean, on Wednesday night, I did ring announcing and play-by-play. I do double duty on these FS1 fights, and the reason why I don't get in the ring is because I can't toss it to myself. So I have my ring announcing mic, and after we're done breaking down the tip, I get into my ring announcing introduction. So it's something I've done for quite some time, but I do like ring announcing, but my ultimate passion is play-by-play. But to get back to your original question, my preparation for play-by-play is so much more thorough, in-depth, and lengthier because of what it entails. Like, I put myself through tests, and when it comes to that, is I go back, I look at my notes, I do my preparation, then I'll ask myself questions in my hotel room, because I want to know these guys frontwards and backwards, sideways, up and down. I want to know everything about them, and I do know a lot about them, but it is seeking out that other information, is doing as much homework as you can, and being able to sort of compartmentalize it to make it a part of the broadcast. I always believe that you should have more information than what you give away on the telecast.
Okay. That's very interesting, and I would imagine being well versed comes with the job. And I imagine you getting to do play-by-play next to these great world champions. Like Wednesday, I watched the card. You were your partner was Sean Porter, you know, and he how is that getting to sit next to them and hear how they break down a fight and see what they see in the fight?
Well, what I like is because, I'm a fight fan first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one thing that people have to understand is that I'm a commentator, but I'm a fight fan. So for me, is that nobody does it better than these guys inside that ring. I mean, I am very fortunate to have some great partners on these FS1 telecasts. Joe Goosen, legendary trainer. I mean, he is, I think, the best analyst and one of the best analysts in the business. And Sean Porter, former world champion. So even in like the green room, as we're talking about the show and the structure of the show, I like to pick their brain because I have that inquiring mind and being able to hear their analysis. And when I ask them questions, it's not because on the broadcast, it's because those are questions that I legitimately want answers to and that they have the answer to. So all the questions I bring up on the air are all things that me as a fight fan that I want to know. And if I want to know them as a fight fan, then you probably want to know them too, because you guys are at home watching this and you're a fight fan.
Understood. Twine, do you have something else?
Yeah, I had a question as far as being a fan first, like you said, and now doing play-by-play. We all have our fight favorites, our favorite fighters, currently, past. How hard is it for you to keep any kind of bias out of commentary while you're doing it? Is that something you've ever struggled with, or something that's at the back of your mind, while you're actually doing the color commentary?
So look, I mean, I'm pretty cool with most of these guys, and I have traveled a lot of roads and been in a lot of cities with them, because I've been with PBC since, dating back to officially July of 2015. And a lot of them I knew even before then. So, you develop this relationship and this chemistry with them. The way, there's certain guys that I'm like, man, like, that's my guy, whatever. I mean, they're all kind of, my guys in certain ways.
Yeah.
But the way that I approach it is that, like for instance, last week, I'm cordial with Gervonta Davis. I'm very cool with Leo Santa Cruz. My whole focus is that, look, I understand these guys got to go out and they have to perform, and they're going to have to hurt each other. I mean, that's the name of the game. That's the business. But my hope is that they are safe and they're able to walk out of the ring under their own power. So when you have guys that are fighting each other that that you're cool with, like last week in San Antonio, especially with that knockout of Gervonta over Leo, I just hope that they're okay, that they're safe, and that they walk out under their own power. And if they do go to the hospital, then it's a quick stop just for observation, and they're out of there later that night. So, that's my hope more than anything, and that's how I approach it. So it's kind of like you take your emotional side out of it, and you literally have to think like, hey, this is fighter A, this is fighter B. I got to tell their story, because it's not fair to wear your emotion on your sleeve, and that's something that I don't do. So I take the emotional side out of it, and I think more in terms of I have to look at it for what it is, because you might be a fan of another fighter or whatever. You might not like both guys, but you're a fight fan. You know what I mean? I mean, it's possible. So that's what I do and stuff. So what I do is I'm emotionless when I call a fight. Now I do get emotional when a fight starts building up and it becomes something very special, and I do it objectively, because you are not to take sides. That's why when people ask me my prediction, 99.9% of the time on main events, I don't give any predictions. Even on undercards, I'm very, very few and far between, because it's not fair and it's not respectful to anybody involved.
Understood. So having been involved, as you stated, with a lot of big fights and a lot of big cards, what in your mind is the biggest event that you've ever been a part of?
I mean, for me, Mayweather McGregor, I was on the tour of that one with the in arena host, thanks to Leonard Ellerby and Kelly Swanson and TGB Promotions, Tom Brown, Barry Nicholson Brown, Showtime, Chris De Blasio, Steven Espinoza, those guys. Everyone had to sign off on who was going to be on that tour. So Showtime, Mayweather Promotions, TGB Promotions, PBC, the late great. I don't know if you guys know Skip Davis, who used to handle operations for PBC. Skip was one of the guys that would handle, the logistics and making sure that our loadings were correct and dealing with fighters. He passed away 2 years ago in September of 2018. It's a loss that we're still feeling within the PBC family, but Skip went to bat for me too. And that was the biggest event that I've ever been a part of. 4 cities in 4 days. It was unbelievable. Fight-wise, Mayweather McGregor, I was the translator on the Fox broadcast of that. I look at a few, right? So when I called Fury and Wilder 1, that was massive. Staples Center, Los Angeles, heavyweight championship of the world, celebrities in the house. It was almost 2 years ago. Another one that stands out was my HBO debut, April of 2015. Artie Palullo and Matt Rowland, Mark Abrams, those guys gave me a lot of love. And to be able to have Jim Lampley throw it up to me in the ring so I can introduce the main event, that was as intoxicating and as much of an honor as I've experienced in this business. And then the fight between Provodnikov and Matisse was unbelievable. Another big one, and I'm very fortunate to have done it, was the Naoya Inoue and Nonito Donaire fight last November at Saitama Super Arena in Japan. Working with the World Boxing Super Series, those guys are phenomenal. To work with, Khalil Southerland and, all those guys are just wonderful people. And, working with Mr. Honda, the legendary Japanese promoter who treated me unbelievably. Right before the co-main event, one of the guys asked me, they were like, hey, can you sit? I was sitting at the broadcast table and they go, can you sit next to Mr. Honda? And I said, well, did I do something wrong? And they go, no. They go, Mr. Honda just wants, is requesting you to sit next to him. And that was an honor for me. And even though we don't speak the same language, it's the fact that he sat next to me and we kind of communicated about the fight. But being able to ring announce that fight and having over 30 million Japanese people, going ahead and watching the fight and millions around the world, that was massive for me. And I even worked on some Japanese and had like one sentence at the beginning in Japanese, and I rehearsed it and everything else. That was massive because here is a world title fight. Like, I'm from East Chicago, Indiana, right? A suburb outside of Chicago, right over the state line, and to be here in Japan, ring announcing a world title fight, and to have the Japanese people, they are so appreciative. They're some of the best fight fans in the world. That was one that really stood out. So I've had a lot of tremendous and historic moments that I've been fortunate to be a part of, and hopefully we continue that trend.
I mean, man, real quick, speaking of Japan, I want to send a shout out to Rudy Hernandez. I believe his fighter Junto Nakatani won the vacant WBO flyweight title. I believe it was yesterday. He beat Mark Magramo. So shout out to him. And so having all that travel, man, you have been the hardest working man in boxing. I mean, you were just in Texas, and then where were you Wednesday? Was I can't remember what they said. What state you were in?
Yeah, we're in Los Angeles. I'm currently in Los Angeles. I'll be here in LA for the next few weeks. When it comes to we have FS1 on November 14th, FS1 November 21st, and then tomorrow's card on Fox.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot the fight was in Las Vegas or in LA.
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles last weekend with Tank. Speaking of that card, we'll jump into that real fast if you don't mind. Yeah. Or if you got to run, me and Twine can do whatever.
I mean, I got time, guys. I'm in the bubble. I got bubble life, so
okay.
You need me.
Awesome. So what did you come away thinking of Tank Davis after that fight?
I mean, listen, he put it together. I mean, his most difficult challenge. He didn't panic. He was strategic. He was calculated. He stuck to his game plan. He believed in himself. He did not allow the stage to get the best of him. Instead, he rose to the occasion, and he proved it with an unbelievable finish. I mean, that is the highlight or that's the knockout of the year. I mean, listen, I know the Povetkin and Dillian Whyte knockout was impressive, but I think this one takes it with the force and how Leo never been knocked out before. That was just, it was a scary moment for a few minutes. That's that I will say that was a scary few moments and few minutes, but thankfully Leo's okay. But Gervonta, just on all parts, he finally gets it. Even after the fight, he showed class, thanking Leo and dedicating the fight to Leo's dad for what Leo's dad has been through. It's like, man, oh man, and I said this on Twitter on Sunday when I was traveling here to Los Angeles, that finally finally Gervonta has matured right before our very eyes. And that's what I truly do believe. And we witnessed that on Saturday night and Halloween night.
All right, Twine. Now we know in that fight, he won the the 130 strap and the 135 strap was up for grabs. What division would you like to see him concentrate on in the future?
I mean, I think it's obvious, guys. 135, those are the bigger names when it comes to that division. You know, Teofimo Lopez and him. Oh my gosh, talk about, you know, something special. If, you know, who knows? Maybe Vasily Lomachenko, depending on what he's able to do. Maybe he challenges Tanker, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the more viable options when it comes to financially are that at 135. And I think that, you know, he made the weight and he's showing discipline, but he's also becoming 25. He's getting into his mid-20s as you start to really develop into your man muscle, and it's not as easy to lose the weight. I think 135 would suit him best.
Twine, what about you?
I mean, I think there's interesting fights for him in both weight classes, honestly. Even at 130, you know, we have I know the fight was just we'll get into it later, but you know, Berchelt Valdez, that was just called off. But I mean, I think that would be a good fight at 130. There's been talks of Lomachenko possibly moving back down to 130 because you know, they always thought, you know, most people thought he was always too small for 135. We have Shakur Stevenson that will be vying for as a mandatory for the WBO belt soon. I guess after Jamel Herring and Carl Frampton fight. So I mean, there's interesting fights in both weight classes. I would love to see a DMV area showdown between him and Gary Russell at 130. So I mean,
that's a matchup. Yeah, I like that fight a lot.
Me too.
I mean, I kind of lean more towards 130. You know, I think Gervonta, like, he has the power and the strength and definitely like the build to handle people at 135. But you know, he is, you know, 5'5". So I mean, I feel like 130 kind of suits him as long as he can make the weight comfortably.
That's the division I'd like to see him remain in because I think Teofimo Lopez is going to 140. I believe that he might find his his mandatory is the kid from Australia. Is that correct? But if he, I think he'll just fight him because he's waiting on the Ramirez-Taylor unification fight to happen so they can move up and hopefully get that fight right away. Which then, you know, that would still leave an interesting discussion between Tank Davis and Devin Haney and, you know, Lomachenko, should he stay at 135. But I really like the 130 division because of Shakur Stevenson. Berchelt offers an interesting matchup stylistically. I don't know how easy that would be to make the fight because they do fight for two different networks or promotional companies. But I would like to see him concentrate and unify the 130 division and then possibly move up to 135.
Yeah, I'd be okay with either or, guys. I mean, you know, I think they're both. I think he's a stud at 130 and 135. But, I mean, we saw with the pay-per-view numbers, at least, you know, reportedly over 200,000 buys, maybe upwards over 225. So that's a very strong first effort in the middle of a worldwide pandemic.
I'm following up on that, Ray. How do you see him following up that, you know, those kind of numbers and that performance? Do you see him being able to carry that over continuously?
I think so.
Okay.
I do believe that's the case because, you know, he proved it and everyone is talking about it. I mean, that fight, the highlight knockout has been seen by, I think, 10 or 15 million people on Showtime's YouTube page and PBC's YouTube page, something, you know, the numbers are crazy. And celebrities are tweeting out about it and everything else. So I think that Gervonta Davis has got, you know, he bit everybody with the pay-per-view bug. And I think it's going to continue when he comes back in the ring in 2021. Now, I think it has to be the right opponent. I think him fighting a mandatory, if it's an unknown mandatory, I don't know if they could go to pay-per-view with that. But I think that him on regular Showtime against his mandatory would draw crazy numbers, and him against, Gary Russell, I think could be a pay-per-view fight as well.
That is actually my favorite fight amongst the bunch. And it's because Gary Russell both of them can sell the fight. Like we had a discussion when Gary Russell was calling out Crawford about how unrealistic that really was for him to fight a guy who fights at 147, but realistically walks around at 157, 160. Big, he's a much bigger guy. And we talked about, with him calling these people out was useless, but him calling out Tank Davis and the way he has, and I know you've seen it on social media, the videos he's been making, that is an excellent way to sell a fight. And I think that's a really big fight. I really would like to see that fight. And I think all of us agree on that.
Well, that's Gary, though. I mean, Malachi, that's Gary, man. I mean, Gary is not trying to sell a fight. That's legitimately how Gary feels. I mean, if you talk to Gary, he's very confident in himself. He believes in himself and crazy footwork, got unbelievable hand speed, very smart, intelligent. I think he's looking for that marquee name, and Gervonta could be that guy. And hopefully we do it with fans in attendance sometime next year.
I would love it. He is a character, man. I really like him, and I know you say it's him, and I believe you. But to me, I could show that to my friends, and if that fight's made, I could be like, "Look what this guy, this is what he's saying," and they're gonna want to see it. You know what I mean? So whether it's just him being him, or like I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but it sells the fight, man. I like it.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, that's literally, I mean, he's just, when it comes to fighting, talking to other fighters within his weight class, Gary is blunt, and I like it. You know what I mean? He respects other guys, but he's blunt. He's like, that guy don't belong in my, don't even talk about that guy with me in the same ring. He goes, I'm going to embarrass him. I'm like, okay, you know what I mean? Like,
and his skills are amazing. I just hate to see, because I thought Rigondeaux, and I know this ain't on topic, but I thought Rigondeaux was an amazing fighter. Yeah. And it was so sad that the guys that were around his weight class wanted no part of him because he was so much of a better fighter than they were. You know what I mean? That he had to move all the way up in weight and talk himself into getting embarrassed by Lomachenko. And I just didn't want to see that happen to Gary, because there's a lot of haters out here in this world. And I think Gary Russell's an amazing fighter, elite hand speed. And the fighters in his weight class, his natural weight class, just don't want to fight him. So in order to get the big fight, you got to sometimes, like that Rigondeaux model, I just did not want to see that happen to him. But him versus Tank is a much different issue.
Well, I also, when it comes to Gary Russell, I think that Leo will likely have a comeback fight. And then after that, who knows, Leo and Gary Russell at 26. So Gary Russell has two names that are high-profile names that he can have as a dance partner. And then we will see how Gary responds at that big stage. I think he'll do well in, and I think he's very much capable of beating both men.
Do you think that fight with Leo was more, I guess, marketable and easier to make now, being that Leo just had his pay-per-view performance with Tank, considering how, he actually performed well, until the knockout. He did win some.
I don't think Leo, sorry to cut you off, Twine, but I thought Leo's stock did not lower. I don't think he lost any more steam. I think he gained respect from fight fans because he fought a guy much bigger than him. And he fought a guy that if you make one mistake, he can put you out. And guess what? Leo made one mistake and he paid dearly for it. So it's that whole mindset, dare to be great. And nobody had ever stopped Leo Santa Cruz. And credit to Gervonta Davis. But we need to get away from this whole mindset. And this is something that I preached on your show the last time, quote unquote, is that the undefeated, that being an undefeated fighter is special. But if you lose once or twice or even 4 or 5 times, that's okay. because, you know, when you step inside that ring, you are taking a significant gamble. It's okay to lose a few times in your career. It all depends on how you respond from it.
Okay. Well, speaking of the last time you was on our show, you know, you've seen that we've made it one of our sound bites. We have several that we start off our shows with. And the subject of that sound bite was the ex-heavyweight champion, Deontay Wilder. Since that time, some stuff has came out. Deontay, I don't know if you've seen his video.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay. I mean, if this isn't something you don't feel, because, you know, you got to see these guys and everything.
I mean, well, listen, here's what I'll say is that the one item that I, when I talk to fighters and just kind of casually, right, is be yourself. Don't be disingenuous. Be yourself. That's who Deontay Wilder is. That is what he believes. Deontay Wilder, you know how we talk about, and I mentioned this on Wednesday, about judicious economical punching, and that essentially means you don't waste so much emotion. Deontay Wilder is very selective with his words. You know, he's not going to put a video out if he doesn't believe in it, if that's not what's truly in his heart. So being in the media and being a commentator, if that's what he believes in, I'm not someone that is, I'm not paid to give my opinion. I'm paid to give analysis on a particular fight and assess fighters. So if that's what he believes and that's what's in his heart, then that's the bronze bomber for you. You know what I mean? Like, you love him or you hate him. There's no in between with fans and media members alike. So my whole thing is, he's not being disingenuous when it comes to his thoughts on the matter. So that's him. So when people ask me, hey, what do you think about Deontay Wilder or his comments? I'm like, that's Deontay Wilder. Who am I to say that it's right or wrong? You know what I mean? My opinion on the matter does not matter. All I care about is the fact that he is being a straight shooter and he's saying what he believes. And honestly, I kind of like how he's being opinionated. Whether you think it's good or bad, it's the bronze bomber. So you don't get an in between. You don't get this, you know, someone who thinks this is how I should act because the media is going to accept me this way or whatever. Deontay Wilder's like, you know, I don't really care what you think. This is who I am. For those that accept me, great. For those that do not want to accept me, that's okay too. So he's real is what it is.
All right. And oh, go ahead, Twine.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to follow up with that as far as I mean, you have a lot of exposure to the background scenes as far as what goes on with these fighters and fights, you know, and there's also been a lot of talk about, you know, the Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder 3 trilogy being completely dead now. I don't know if it's just due to COVID. Some have said it's due to contract bypassing as far as expiration. Just knowing what you know as far as the big names behind the scenes, is this still a viable option in a fight that could happen in 2021 as far as the trilogy?
I would hope so, but I don't know, guys. I mean, that's just my honest assessment, is that I've heard way too many conflicting reports, and I don't know which way to lean. You know, I'm hoping it happens. I believe that it should happen. Whether or not it does transpire or not, I don't know. I mean, listen, I don't know if the contract ran out. I don't know. I have no idea. I know that Tyson Fury wants to remain active, and that's fine. But, I mean, look, you know, we have a pay-per-view December 5 with Errol Spence, Danny Garcia, and to my knowledge, the networks did not want to go on December 5 or December 19th when it came to Fox or ESPN because of college football. So both networks, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, they said they did not want to go on that date of December 19th. December 5th got moved with Errol and Danny, so that would have been the next viable option from both the Fox and the ESPN standpoint. They both said no because of college football. Understandably, college football got pushed this year because of COVID-19. So I still don't know what the status is. I mean, honestly, I think it has a, you know, it's up in the air when it comes to if it happens or not. But December 19th looks like it might be busy for us after all.
Twine, speaking of the stuff that came out last week, for you, what was like the wildest? Because there was like, it was like, because I don't know if you follow all the boxing groups and the stories. The glove story had been out for quite a while, on YouTube and stuff. But then when the other stuff started coming out, Twine, what was is it still the glove thing? Is that still the wildest story for you, or is it something that came later?
Honestly, the wildest for me is with his former trainer Mark Breland. I mean, I've had contact with both of them, being part of media as far as covering fights in the past. Mark is a real genuine dude. If you know him and talk to him a lot, real quiet and unspoken. You could call him whispers essentially. So I mean, that's probably the one that I think is probably the wildest for me. But I mean, as far as the other things that have came out, like we have seen a lot of people putting out YouTube videos as far as the gloves. A lot of people diving deep into that in Tyson Fury's past indiscretions, as far as in and inside and outside the ring. But that one probably struck hardest as far as the comments towards Mark Breland for me.
Yeah, that was. Again, I don't know their relationship. I don't know anything, in between it. That's unusual for. Well, it's happened before. Didn't after he lost. No, the homie. Dang, he's right behind me too. George Foreman. Didn't George Foreman say somebody spiked his water when he fought Ali? And you know what I mean? So it's not in everything, nothing that we haven't actually heard before from other fighters. I mean, or like Spinal. Remember when Tyson Spinal? You know what I mean? So it was like, it is what it is. I hope they get to fight again. And if they don't, go ahead.
That's the most important thing, guys. Is that the third fight happens again. I think that's the most important thing, and hopefully we can get closer to that after December 5th. Agree.
Now, did you get to see any of the other fights from last weekend that were on other cards, like Usyk fought Chisora? Have you got to see that fight yet?
I have not watched that fight. The fight I did see was the Inoue performance over Maloney. I thought Inoue looked phenomenal. Okay. I mean, I really love. I mean, I did 2 of his fights in Japan. The kid is special. Make no mistake about it. And I want to see him. And I want, who is the guy at 118?
Casimiro.
Casimiro. I mean, that's what I'd like to see him. Step inside the ring with Janriel Casimiro. Hopefully that happens. But I think Inoue's in for another high-profile opponent here stateside.
Okay.
What do you think?
News-wise though, guys. I mean, for me, over the past week. When I'm seeing the Canelo news drop today and stuff like that, and it was just one thing after another, it was like, okay, like he's a free agent. And I was like, all right, well, is this just kind of fodder or whatever? And then, then GoldenBoy came out with a statement. And then after that, Reynoso came out with a statement. I'm like, wow, this is real. Like, this is really happening. Like, oh, man. And then DAZN came out with a statement. So it has been a wild week when it comes to news and information in the world of boxing.
That was actually one of our topics. So, I mean, thanks for the segue.
Great. Sorry about that, Tess.
You're on the job as usual, Ray. A great segue. How do you actually see this playing out? I know you don't like to give too many opinions on this, but I mean, it is a topic. How do you see this playing out? Things are real crazy promotional-wise. Yeah. And, Canelo is probably the most marketable fighter in the world now. Yeah. So I mean, how do you see this planning out for him in as far as moving forward for him?
Malachi and Twine, I am excited as hell. I mean, the fact that I saw Mike Hoppenger's tweet, and it was on. I think Chava ESPN is the first one that broke it. That there are discussions right now between Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant for December 19th on pay-per-view potentially. If that happens, oh man, I am fired up for that one. Caleb Plant's always wanted that high-profile name. I've watched Caleb Plant's career for a long time, and he gets up for those big marquee fights. And that big marquee fight that he had was against Jose Luis Uzcategui. And even in the lead up to that fight, months before, he goes, I'm going to embarrass this guy. I mean, that's what he told me. He goes, I'm going to embarrass this guy. And what did he do? He knocked him down early in the fight, and he put on a clinic. And now with Canelo, this is a major opportunity for him and for Canelo Alvarez to potentially, and I don't know anything, right? I mean, I'm hoping that he fights under the Premier Boxing Champions banner because, Michelle Rosado, Raging Babe, she put it out like, look, you got Canelo and Caleb Plant. You also have Canelo, Jermall Charlo, potentially down the line, Canelo, Errol Spence Jr., Canelo and Jared Hurd down the line. I mean, look at the names that are fighting with PBC. Canelo Benavidez. I mean, those are all big names, man, that he can go up against and that he can test his skills against. I mean, can you imagine Canelo, Jermall Charlo on Cinco de Mayo in Las Vegas for Canelo and David Benavidez and all Mexican war on the Mexican Independence Day next year? I mean, I am really hopeful and I'm optimistic that he's going to fight under the Premier Boxing Champions banner because it makes sense. Look at the names at 54, 60, and 68 that he can endeavor into when it comes to, as they like to say, this side of the street. So, man, it's got me all kinds of fired up. The biggest star in boxing, fighting under the Premier Boxing Champions banner, to me, I mean, it's a match made in heaven.
Definitely agree. I know there had been talks about Plant being an option for him previously before his contract dispute, and he was unable to find an opponent in time to meet. What was it? The September date, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you see him needing a crowd necessarily right now to the sell or be more marketable? Because we're still in the middle of a pandemic. We just now started seeing crowds again. So I'm thinking like the only state that's open right now really is Texas as far as crowds.
Well, he's fought in Texas before, Twine. So, I mean, I think if he does fight Caleb Plant, I think he'll end up somewhere in Texas.
Okay. Malachi, what were your thoughts on the news that came out today as far as Canelo's release from the zone? You're muted. I think you're muted.
My bad. I said that Ray. That was a great sell. It's a great sell for him to go, to PBC. I would like to see him still. If he doesn't choose that route, he can stay independent, and I think everyone would still work with him, and then he could get any big fight that he wanted to. I mean, still, if he went under the banner, PBC, you can't go wrong. But if I don't see that, even if he stayed independent, was like, you know what, I'm going to go the Floyd Mayweather route, and I'm gonna be my own promoter. I think everybody would still work with him.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I could see him doing that. I could see him doing that, but also having, being putting his fights with PBC. Mm-hmm. So I think it'll be no doubt Canelo Promotions, but I think he's going to be tied to a network, whether it be Showtime or Fox or both. And it'll be known as, he's fighting with PBC and stuff because, the names, look how deep the roster is. And now I don't know, I could be wrong, but from the Eddie Hearn standpoint, Eddie's tied to DAZN. Canelo just got out of the deal with DAZN. So you would think, well, there goes the names of like Billy Joe Saunders. And, that area now has been tabled. And Top Rank really doesn't have many deep names and marketable names at 54, at 60, even at 68. So, like, what are you going to do at that point? So it's like, really, where does he have to go to find those kind of names? And the rosters and the divisions are deep with PBC at 54. It's starting to get better at 60 and 68. I mean, so,
Reach one.
Yeah, I definitely agree as far as his promotional route. I mean, that was something we seen Floyd do. He had Floyd Mayweather Promotions, when he was still getting aided by GoldenBoy, before the PBC and GoldenBoy split, and they had their own venture start. So, I mean, I know Canelo has his own promotional company now. The matter is, does he actually have a promotional license, which held Floyd Mayweather back before, PBC was launched. So, I mean, that's probably what we had to wait for. But I definitely agree with Ray. I think his best move would be to go with the names that are with PBC. You have the support of two networks there as opposed to one. I think more visibility than DAZN. And, like Ray said, there's definitely a deeper talented roster. And, I'm anxious to see, I would like the Caleb Plant fight, but Benavidez, that's the one that stands out most for me as far as 168 opponents. I would love to see that.
Yeah, it'd be a good
a
fight.
hellacious fight.
But I don't think you fighting Caleb Plant can go wrong either. I would like to see it because I know there's a lot of people that don't like Canelo, and they really, a lot of them say Caleb Plant can beat him. So it would be an interesting matchup. So it's some interesting news as well came out. I think it was yesterday. David Haye did an interview in which he offered up his fighter Chisora to step in for Povetkin, because I believe Povetkin has contacted COVID-19. I hope he gets well soon. And so, which would have delayed the Whyte fight. Now, Chisora's just coming off of a fight with Usyk. Twine, do you think it's just a little too early? Because I'm like, I know he's his manager, man. He's trying to make him some money, but he's kind of throwing him out there.
I can see it both ways. I mean, Chisora didn't take a lot of damage against Usyk. So, I know there usually is mandatory times that you lay off. It's not like the old days where people, boxers will fight 10 times in a year per se, like some prospects do now. But I definitely think it's biting off more than he can chew at the moment. I'm not sure what he really gains from it as far as a chance just to avenge a loss. It wouldn't be for a title eliminator or anything like that at the moment, considering Dillian Whyte lost the So, I mean, it's definitely an entertaining fight. Both of the other two fights were thrilling. And, Chisora was arguably winning both of those fights prior to, one losing by decision and a knockout in the second one. So I definitely think it's a competitive fight, and I would love to see it again. I'm just not sure, with the timing of it is really possible.
Yeah, I think it's I could see it both ways. So one, the fact that, Chisora can potentially avenge a loss, and also David Haye's probably thinking, look, like, he didn't take much damage. This guy's in shape. Let me get him back in the ring as soon as possible because he's in shape and it doesn't give him much of a layoff. And as you get older, you don't want to have those crazy long layoffs if you're healthy, because you got to stay active, you got to stay sharp. And that might be David Haye's mentality. With Haye being a former fighter, you would think that he's thinking in a cautionary mindset, which I do believe he is. But he's probably thinking, Chisora's in shape. I'll give him a week off. And, I'm already offering him the fight. And if Eddie Hearn's willing to bite on it, why not make it happen?
Agreed. All right, well, let's move on to this weekend's fight between WBC champion Devin Haney and Eureka Gamboa. A lot of people aren't exactly happy with the fight, considering what we got last week. We've seen Gamboa. He fought a good fight versus Tank, but he was stopped in the 12th round. He's coming off a loss. He's fighting for another world title off a loss. Some people don't agree that you should be allowed to fight for a title off a loss, but it's throughout boxing history we see that. Twine, what do you expect out of this fight? And who do you like?
I think it's probably gonna be a good standout performance for Haney as far as outboxing Gamboa. I don't necessarily see it ending in a knockout like Tank did against Gamboa, but I definitely do see him putting on a stellar boxing performance. So I'm definitely I think I would roll with him in the win. This would probably be his biggest opponent to date, so I can understand what like they say, padding the resume per se. But this is still a big win for him. I'll give him credit for it regardless. Considering he can't get the guys he wants at 135, they don't necessarily see too interested in him. Like Teo, and it's not possible to make the Garcia fight at the moment, which I think would be big considering they're both young. And Garcia brings a big name to the fight and a huge following. But I think this is probably the best they could do as far as opponent selection at the time. And considering, what we're dealing with as far as the pandemic, it would actually be here in Florida where I live. I'm not sure if there's going to be a live arena or a live crowd or not, but I definitely think it's going to be a good performance for Devin, and it will get a chance for people to see him showcase his skills. I haven't necessarily been impressed with him all the time. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, getting that kind of, I guess, Shakur Teofimo Lopez performance to where I could be like, he's finally living the part. So that's what I'm expecting with this fight against Gamboa.
Yeah, I'm seeing a clinical performance out of Devin Haney. I think Gamboa is going to come ready to go, in shape. He looks very good. And Gamboa could give Devin Haney some issues. He was a former Olympic gold medalist, former world champion. So he's someone that you can't count out. But if Devin Haney is truly special and truly what everyone believes he could be, then he needs to make this a one-sided, lopsided performance in his favor. His dad is really high on him. His dad has been calling out Tank Davis for a while. That's the fight that they want. That's the fight that they believe they deserve. Well, okay, that's fine. And, you know, I like Devin Haney a lot. I mean, I think he has a lot of upside. He's a wonderful person. But if you're talking that way, you got to perform that way, especially after the guy that you're calling out looked as good as he did the week before. I mean, it's similar to that of when you look at the welterweight division, right, coming up. So you're looking at, I mean, even let's go back to Teofimo Lopez. So Teofimo Lopez beat Lomachenko, looked tremendous. Tank followed it up and did his thing in his own way. And now it's Devin Haney. On the welterweight side, Terrence Crawford is going to be fighting Kell Brook on November 14. And, you know, Crawford is going to be first. Then 3 weeks later, Errol Spence and Danny Garcia. So how's that going to go? These guys pay attention to each other's performances because they want, number one, they have to handle and they got to get the win. But, you know, in the back of their mind, they're like, wait a minute, I got to prove that I'm the best, that I'm the man here in this division. Well, Teofimo Lopez went first. Gervonta followed it up with his spectacular performance. Devin Haney, you're up. And then after that, Ryan Garcia's up. So you know, these guys are kind of jockeying for position to see who is the bright young star, 25 and younger, at 135.
All right. For me, this fight really only tells me anything about Devin Haney. And well, there's two ways it'll tell me something about Haney. If he goes out there and he blows Gamboa out, and he does, like as Ray was talking about, puts on a show, makes a statement. If he goes out there and just outboxes him, that's what I expected. At that point, the only thing it'll tell me, only other thing that this fight can possibly tell me about Devin Haney is if he loses this fight. At that point, I would be like, he is not who everyone told me he was. I think he wins the fight rather easily. I agree with Twine. I don't think he puts his lights out, or he might get a late stoppage, but I just don't. I don't see the power, the one that KO power that I saw from Tank Davis, that I've seen from Tank Davis. I think Devin Haney is a much different. He's a boxer, and he's a very good boxer. I think he has as much talent as anybody in the 135-pound division. Unfortunately, he's like his strap. It's hard for me to respect his title when he received it by email, basically. So it's like now you're defending it against Gamboa, who I don't believe should be here. And I know Twine's talking about the pandemic. Well, that we've seen big fights in the pandemic. You know, it took us to the last couple of months, but we started to get them. Your fight scheduled after these bigger fights, and you're fighting Gamboa. How am I want to believe in you, but this fight really doesn't tell me nothing about it unless you blow him out or you lose. Moving on, Twine, what would be your next topic?
We have anything else that happened this week? I guess as far as we touched on the coronavirus. I guess two of our fights have been canceled this week. Two big fights at that. We already spoke on the Dillian Whyte Povetkin team match being canceled. But another one that I was interested in seeing, and I thought was probably going to be a candidate for fight of the year, that got canceled, was Miguel Berchelt versus Oscar Valdez. Berchelt came down with coronavirus as well. We hope he gets better soon. So I mean, that was kind of disappointing for me. What are you guys' thoughts as far as that? You know, us losing these big fights. For the most part, all the promotional companies have taken the proper precaution, and you know, we've only seen a couple of other cards canceled. But I mean, as far as major events, we haven't seen anything like this happen until this week with both of these fights being canceled. So what are your thoughts on that, Malachi? And I guess I'll let Ray conclude on it.
I just think it's something that we're going to have to learn to deal with until they come up with a vaccine or, some other preventative measure.
Yeah, it's something that it's hard. I mean, because it's, we still, I don't think we know enough about this thing to fully understand how you contract it and everything else. I mean, you can wear your mask and social distancing, but sometimes it's almost, you can have all the precautions necessary, but it could be inevitable that, you get it, or, in the most crazy way. But I think that it's tabled for a little while, but I do think it'll happen. And, safety first and foremost with these fighters. So even though it's not happening in December, I think it could happen maybe middle of January, even, early part of January. So, decide to be quarantined for 14 days, make sure you're handling everything correctly. And then hopefully they resume this preparation for this fight. But, guys, we have a heavyweight triple header tomorrow night with Luis Ortiz, Alexander Flores. Talked with Ortiz yesterday. He seems focused, he's determined, and he's ready to go.
Real fast before we leave, Twine, would you like to see out of Ortiz in this fight, and for him to move forward in the division? Because he does have the 2 losses to Wilder. He isn't getting any younger. It's not his fault that he had a late start as a professional, considering where he came from. What would you like to see out of Ortiz?
I mean, honestly, just a spectacular knockout to put him back in position for another big fight. Andy Ruiz is training with a Chepo now. I would love to see that as a possible fight down the line, as a next fight for him. Because I know Andy wants to be vying for a championship title again as well. It's definitely a good fight for both of them. So I just want to see Ortiz come out and put on a spectacular performance, possible KO victory, and just tell people that he's still here. That's pretty much all I think he needs to do.
Well, Twine, I'm glad you brought up Andy Ruiz, because that's what Luis Ortiz told me yesterday on PBC Instagram Live. I talked with Luis and his trainer Herman Caicedo, and they told me that the focus is they want Andy Ruiz next. Originally, Andy Ruiz was supposed to be fighting on this card, either as a main event or co-main event, and they were going to build towards their fight if they were both successful. So I think Andy Ruiz will probably come back sometime January, February. And I asked Luis, I'm like, if you're successful, would you wait for Andy Ruiz? He goes, yeah, I don't mind waiting for him and taking him on in late springtime, early summer of 2021. He goes, that's the fight I want. That's the fight that, as former heavyweight champion of the world, I know I can beat him. And I know that a win over Andy Ruiz puts me in line to be a potential opponent for one of the heavyweight champions of the world, whoever that may be at that point. So I think Luis Ortiz is laser focused, 1, on Alexander Flores, but 2, if he gets the W, which, I think he'll look impressive. And I do believe that it'll be Luis Ortiz and Andy Ruiz, assuming they both get victories in their next fight.
And that's a fight I'd heard possible afterwards. But you know what? Who I'd like to see him fight is Alexander Usyk, because that would answer so many questions for me about Alexander Usyk's future in the heavyweight division. Because if he was able to beat Luis Ortiz, who I think is still one of the top contenders in the heavyweight division because of his skill set. He's one of the most skilled fighters. I favored him both fights. I won't even lie, against Wilder. I took him in both fights. I was wrong both times.
As usual.
But he was winning both fights. You took him too, I believe, my guy.
No, I would never go over Bronze Bomber, man. No.
Okay, you're lying. You're lying. Anyway, I took Ortiz. He proved me wrong. I still believe in him. So I would love to see him fight Alexander Usyk. I just think he would beat Usyk. I think I think Usyk just don't have the power to defeat these bigger, heavier-handed heavyweights. And if you get someone like Ortiz who can move with him, that's going to be a bad night for him.
Yeah. I mean, listen, Luis Ortiz, and Herman Caicedo confirmed this. He goes, even though he's 41 years of age, heavyweights mature, a little bit later in their careers, and they have a longer shelf life. And that's what they believe in. And you know what I believe in? Because Luis Ortiz is in tip-top shape. He's been working with Larry Whyte, I believe. his strength and conditioning coach. He has another guy, Javier, who's outstanding as well. And I think that Luis Ortiz could have a run of another 2 years to go ahead and capture the heavyweight championship of the world. And he's motivated because he wants to become the first Cuban to capture the heavyweight championship of the world. I mean, that is what is on his mind first and foremost. Second, take care of his family. That's the next thing that's on his mind. And it's what drives him every single day inside the gym.
Ray, let's follow up on that a little bit. As far as you think he has a couple of years left as far as prime, I guess being a prime in the sport. You know, he definitely has the skill set. He hasn't taken a lot of wear and tear as a pro. With the alphabet suit, that's good. You know, all the drama with all the alphabet titles. Do you think he will actually be able to vie for a title in that time frame? You know, considering all the mega fights that are still out there, you know, such as the one we spoke of earlier with Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder trilogy, Fury versus Anthony Joshua. You know, they're talking about a 2-fight series next year, but you know, of course, you got Pulev going against Joshua coming up soon as well. So I mean, with all the alphabet soup, let's not forget Alexander Usyk is a mandatory for Joshua as well. So I mean, with all the alphabet soup, you know, holding back these fights from happening, you know, these other fights, do you think Ortiz could actually get in there in that time span, you know, to vie for another title shot?
Well, he's got to win tomorrow, and then also in his next fight, he's got to win if it is Andy Ruiz. So, you know, he's got to be able to get past those two challenges. So it's like, you know, let's not put the cart before the horse. I think he is very much a viable opponent for Andy Ruiz. I think he could absolutely push Andy Ruiz. I haven't analyzed that fight properly enough to fully dissect it, but I think it's an excellent fight between those two. I think it's a crossroads fight between the others, so the winner will propel themselves to put themselves in line for a title shot. I do believe that Luis Ortiz could do it. Will he? I don't know. But if he fights Andy Ruiz, that would be the fight that could catapult him to challenging for the heavyweight championship of the world. But again, it is an if. If that fight gets made, then he would essentially have destiny in his own hands. And as a prize fighter, the only thing you can ask for is an opportunity. You beat this guy, and you'll probably make a big case for yourself to become and challenge for the heavyweight championship of the world. So Ortiz, if he handles business in those two fights, potentially, if they get made, or if that next fight gets made with Andy, then you know what? It's on him. And that's all you can ask for. You know, in life in general, if you control your own destiny in life, then you know what? It's on you.
Definitely agreed. You're muted again, Malachi.
Oh, my bad. I was to say before we go, I just wanted to tell us just what you thought of the kid from Lithuania, the Olympian. Yes, sir.
Well, listen, Sean Porter and I were very impressed by his performance. So what's interesting about that, guys, is that Marvin Zamudio, his original trainer, tested positive on Sunday for COVID, and then he had to leave the bubble, then tested negative twice on Monday. But because he called Freddie Roach to get into the bubble, Freddie, his former trainer in his first few fights, was the lead trainer. But Marvin communicated with Freddie, and Marvin is a disciple of Freddie Roach. They work together. So it was almost like a seamless transition. With what he was able to do to Justin DeLoach was mightily impressive, because DeLoach is a very tough. I think he's a very good barometer and a measuring stick for fighters. He's beaten some quality names. He's lost to quality names. Rosario, Nate Gallimore, Terrell Williams by split decision. And I think that DeLoach still can make a run at it. He's only 26 years of age. But with what Stanionis was able to do with he's got good defense, solid fundamentals, and he throws everything with force and authority. And he systematically broke down Justin DeLoach. He's only 11-0, and he was very honest with me prior to the fight. He said, listen, he goes, nobody knows who I am. I'm going to show people what I'm all about. And he made a statement on Wednesday night. I'm looking forward to seeing him raise his level of competition. I think he's now a fringe contender, and I want to see him fight someone in the top 20, maybe 13, 14, 15 in the world. I'm excited to see what's next for Stanionis, who's only 26.
Agree. Twine, did you get to see him? If not, I'll just say what I had.
I actually missed the fight. I mean, I was planning to watch it, but didn't. But yeah, I did read about it, and I was surprised that he actually stopped Deloach. So I mean, I was surprised about that part.
I was too, that he actually got the stoppage, because I didn't expect that coming into the fight. I had him favored. And I watching the fight, Sean Porter, he said something basically like, fighting him with Sean, you're going to have a guy coming at you all night. Basically, I'm paraphrasing him, but he said, I just seen that guy in the ring. Like, he's seen himself. I was very impressed. Came very impressed, and I can't wait to see him in the future as well. Well, we've been on for an hour and 5 minutes. We're going to go ahead and shut down. Ray, I want to thank you again for coming on. I want to thank you for also setting up helping set up our next weekend interview. Brittany Goose and Brown.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love it.
Yes,
Brittany's a dear friend of mine. We have known each other for over 6 years, and I know a lot of people in the business, and I'm cool with a lot of people in the business, but even if I were to never work another day in this business, she would be one of my best friends until, we're going to be almost inseparable in that way. That's how close and tight we are. I mean, I'm so proud and honored of how much she's accomplished. I mean, I've watched her grow and develop. We've all grown and developed kind of together. And to watch her become just the vice president of TGB Promotions and all the responsibilities she does that you guys will dive into next week. I mean, she does not get enough credit for what she does. And she's definitely a major asset to the world of boxing. You know what? She's an inspiration, and she is a role model for younger women out there that you can make a difference in literally a male-dominated world. So, I mean, I think she doesn't get enough credit for what she has done for the sport.
Agreed. I'm excited about the interview. Well, like I said, we'll go ahead and close out. Twine, do you have any closing words before we go?
I just want to say thank you to Ray for coming on again, man. It's always an honor. And thanks to everybody that came out and, watched the show tonight.
Yeah, and those will watch it later. Y'all have a wonderful evening, and we're out. All right, 1 second.
Thanks, guys.